Hello, everyone. We are live. Welcome.
Hello.
Happy Wednesday. Michael and I are super excited to see all of you today virtually. This is, I think this the first virtual meetup that we've done, Michael, since COVID?
This is the first virtual meetup that we've done with this format.
With this format. I don't even
Yeah.
remember anywhere. You know what? I definitely have that COVID brain fog that people
Mhm.
have been like, I'm sure you've seen articles about. For
Oh,
those of you who don't
absolutely.
know, I did have COVID and it was pretty bad. Thankfully, I did not need hospitalization or anything. So, but I suffered for quite a bit, and I definitely am experiencing a whole lot of brain fog ever since. I was just reading an article this morning saying that um, people that have recovered from COVID are typically experiencing like mental aging of 10 years, and I'm like, I'm already
Wow.
51. Like, holy crap. But anyway, it sort of makes like every day is like a brand new exciting day if you
Of
don't really
course.
remember everything from before or half of your to-do list.
My wife tells me I have that problem as well. So, and I'm only 38 now. So,
Wait, so it's not
although
COVID related, you're saying?
it may not be COVID related. So,
Anyway, all right. So thank you all for joining us today. By the way, please make sure to leverage. So this is the first time that we're doing a user group meetup in this format on YouTube Live. And we're using some really cool technology. I'm not going to get into the technology because what all of you are here to talk about today is our main topic, which is managing your Salesforce career during COVID. And Michael and I are super excited to have Tiffany Spencer with us. And let's just go ahead and jump right in. So, if any of you, hello, Tiffany.
hello.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
We're doing well. Super excited to have you join us today.
Super excited to be here.
So Tiffany, go ahead and introduce yourself. And by the way, in the meantime, if anyone has any, we do have some people might not have seen it, but in our invite, we sent out a link to a Google form where people can put any questions. So some people did submit some questions, but we'll be happy. We can start off with those questions if nothing is coming in the comments. But while Tiffany is introducing herself, if any of you have career related questions, please go ahead and put it in the comments. Start it with the letter Q so that we know that it's a question and not just a comment. Tiffany, take it away. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Tiffany Spencer. I have been in the Salesforce ecosystem for about 13 years. I started off as an administrator for a small land development company. Um, I was an administrator for a few years, a solo administrator. I moved into a business analyst role with SunTrust Bank at the time, which is a more of an enterprise Salesforce BA role. And then I moved into consulting. And then I did consulting for a years. And then I moved into a pre-sales engineer role and now into management and running my own consulting practice. So it's
Good
a
for
bit of a
you.
career transition there.
Good for you. That's very cool.
Yeah, very cool.
It's funny because a lot of people, I think similar to many industries, many of us, like as we're thinking, what is it that we want to be when we grow up? A lot of us think in a very linear, predefined structure. First, you do this. First you get maybe this level of education, this level of experience, hands-on experience, and then we'll get this kind of a role in this kind of a company with this job title, and then after X amount of time, we'll progress to this other role with a very and it's good. I'm not trying to knock that whatsoever. Like you need to start off with some goals, some plan of some kind, but life throws you not. I'm not going to even say in terms of like many curveballs, many unforeseen opportunities, sometimes challenges. You could look at challenges as opportunities too, to pivot a little bit, take a slightly different path, maybe a path that none of us would have foreseen before. And I think what you just described is part of that. And that's where I think people need a lot of help Because it could be intimidating. It could be overwhelming.
Yeah, I agree. I think that sometimes people overthink their roles and what they think they want to do instead of just getting in there, seeing how you do, seeing what you like, seeing what you don't like, and being brave enough to pivot when you need to pivot. I mean, it took a lot for me to leave SunTrust. I mean, that was a pretty stable job. People stay at SunTrust Bank for years, but I didn't want to do that.
Yeah, I don't blame you. Totally don't blame you. Hey, look, a lot of times people reach out to me also with like career related, like they just look at the fact that, wait, you're an attorney and now you're doing what? Like, how the heck? Like, and I can't really take credit for it. It's not like I thought up this master plan one day. Life happened. And I simply, seized certain opportunities. And yeah, it could be kind of scary. But anyway, let's go ahead and jump in. I see that we do have a couple of questions that have come in. So let me go ahead and take Bill's question over here and pop it on. I'll read it for those of you who can't see it. Bill's asking, I'm wondering if other people feel this way. Saw something recently where someone claimed that admin jobs are going away. I have been unemployed. Hang on, let me throw it back up on the screen. Unemployed since May. So that's got me a bit concerned. This topic, it's funny because this topic actually came up for me yesterday,
Mhm.
and I shared my thoughts on it. Tiffany, go ahead.
I think that's a interesting comment to say admin jobs are going away. I don't I don't see admin jobs going away. Um, they're different size companies, but if you look at the industry, so when I first started, I mean, there was only two roles. You're an admin or a developer. And so if you think about all the companies 10 years ago that started with Salesforce, their orgs are more complex now. And so you have a whole wave of companies that are needing more than an admin. And then you have so many different industries. There's too many products. And so being able to understand what the job is. And so to me, I think admin is uh it's not really the job, so to speak. It's part of a job, but the role is expanding and I think it's interesting what people consider to be an administrator. Uh, for smaller companies, nonprofits, they need a Salesforce administrator because they don't know how to make any changes. But when you get into more complex orgs and bigger companies, there's roles that are admin-ish, but not quite admin roles, I think. And so I think that just the discussion around the title admin is really interesting. But I'll say I don't believe they're going away, in the way that people are describing.
Yeah, Tiffany, to add to that point, I was going to say also, I completely agree with what you're saying. I think the message I have is that they're evolving, and that's the key message here. So, what I see with the admin role is going to happen is you're going to have someone like an analyst or someone that can work more closely to the business also have some type of light, configuration or administration responsibilities. So I think the admin role is always kind of eventually kind of headed in that way. And I think as Salesforce becomes more complex, we're going to see that developer roles, while they're really great, you do need developers. There's a missing component or missing piece to that.
For sure.
So, not only do I agree with both of your comments, I think this is this particular topic is something that we could probably spend several hours chatting about because there's really a lot to unpack here. There's what what is a Salesforce admin, which means a lot of different things to a lot of different people in a lot of different companies. There's also the element of the job poster, the person who is posting that job opening, and what their understanding is of the Salesforce platform, and what is their understanding of the definition of an admin versus a developer. And in my mind, that is probably the biggest factor that plays into this. So, by the way, no one necessarily called it out, but where all of this is coming from, David Liu, who I admire tremendously, he's a friend. He knows what he's talking about as it relates to Salesforce. He's a very smart guy. His YouTube videos are freaking awesome. His blog is awesome. So he recently, as in within the last week, put out a blog and corresponding YouTube video on this particular topic, where his perspective is that admin jobs are disappearing. I respectfully disagree in a major way, and I think the biggest point of differentiation in the way David sees it versus my perspective is it goes back to the topic of the person who is creating that job posting. More often than not, they have no clue. What is a Salesforce admin? And they automatically assume, just like in other technology platforms, the person who rolls up their sleeves to configure that system is called a developer. And more often than not, we've all seen it as job candidates. We've all looked at job openings where in the job description, the role, responsibilities, qualifications are completely freaking insane, not realistic, not even possible. You'll see job postings where like must have 15 to 20 years of Lightning experience. Lightning has not freaking been around that long. Like, what are you talking about? I recently posted on LinkedIn, and a bunch of people, aside from it getting a lot of interest, a lot of people were making fun of it. It was a job posting from Disney for a junior admin, and it asked for an obscene number of certifications, an obscene number of years of experience, and a lot of people jumped on it saying, that's not a freaking junior admin. You don't know what the hell you're talking about. So to me, it goes back to this, and the reason why I think it all goes back to this particular issue is because it's so common. Where I see this on a daily basis myself. I'm working with clients. I am not a developer. I consider myself, I mean, yes, I'm a consultant, but I'm functioning more as on the admin side, declarative drag and drop type of configuration elements. I can't code the simplest anything if my life depended on it.
Me either.
But at the same time, clients who know this about me and my skill set, anytime like something about Apex comes up, I have no hesitation in turning to them saying, do you have a developer on staff? If not, I can certainly bring one in on this project, because I don't, and no one on my team has the kind of development skills necessary to dive into this Apex mumbo jumbo Frankenstein we're talking about. They will still introduce me to their colleagues as, here's David Giller, he's our Salesforce developer.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it all goes
Titles
back to
matter.
that.
And I
Yeah.
think that's how people get confused with job postings too. There's admins, there's business analysts, there's architects, there's different types of architects. There's technical architects, physical business architects, you have developers, and there's different types of developers. And then you can be a developer that only has experience with certain parts of the platform. And so there are so many nuances now. Like just because you're an admin doesn't mean you know Health Cloud
That's
That's
true.
right.
or you know communities, you
Very
know,
true.
or
Absolutely.
financial services cloud. Oh my
Yep.
gosh.
And the way I see it, an admin in the broadest sense, an admin, to your point, Tiffany, an admin is the person who rolls up their sleeves to configure Salesforce and functions as the business liaison between the business folks who understand their processes, what is it that they do as a business from an operations perspective, and the system being Salesforce. So someone needs to play that role, because the sales manager, the sales executive, the CEO, the summer intern, they might insist on getting system admin privileges in the system, but they have no clue what the hell they're doing. So someone needs to play that role. Someone needs to understand the database architecture. Someone needs to understand how the system was configured up until that moment. Someone needs to understand how the business processes and the teams are supported within the system in order to make sense of it. And no matter how you slice it, that person is the admin, regardless of what they're calling it internally within the organization or on their job posting.
Yeah.
Yep.
So All right.
And
Yeah, go
depending on
ahead.
your organization, you have other titles too, because you may have an admin that's actually doing the work, and then you may have a BA that's actually gathering the requirements and then working with the admin, and then you have these roles that are both. And then it's funny, I keep seeing people, well, two things you said that directly relates to looking for a job. So one is that sometimes the admin role is not even called admin at a company.
That's right. That's
That's
right.
right.
Sometimes it's referred to as like Salesforce product owner or project manager. Which, by the
I've
way, goes
seen,
into a whole lot of other areas of the true responsibilities of the Salesforce admin. It's not only the person who rolls up there. It depends on the organization, depends on the size of the organization, depends on the skill set of people within the team. A lot of times it's the person who is facilitating change management. So a lot of times it's the person who is the project manager. Sometimes it's one and the same as the business analyst.
Mhm.
And a
mhm,
lot
Some
of times,
organizations don't even put a lot into the title, quite frankly, because they realize that can also evolve. So that's very important to look at sometimes these titles. They're put out there, but the organization gives you the freedom to kind of evolve the title. So it's very broad or very generic. I had
yeah,
a title like that.
yeah, absolutely. All right, let's jump into the next question. So I picked this question because actually I saw a couple of questions that are very similar. So Dara's asking, what's your take on the large number of people entering the Salesforce ecosystem in the past few months? Like many others, I've gotten an admin cert and I am and seeking experience. How would you stand out? Tiffany, how would you respond to this one?
I think that's different for every person. You have to look at your background. So if you
Exactly.
have a healthcare background, then you may want to take your admin cert and get more health cloud experience, or look for ways to emphasize your industry knowledge. And so I think industry knowledge is a big way to make yourself stand out, because you're adding Salesforce skills to the skills and the experience and knowledge that you already have. And so when you're looking for a career, you have to learn how to put together this amazing picture of you. Remember that you're selling yourself. And so you have to think about, what are, if you were a car salesman and you were a car, then what are all your great features and everything that you can highlight about yourself that another person won't have? That makes sense.
It makes complete sense. And by the way, Tiffany, I couldn't agree with you more. Michael, your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think you need to play to your strengths. That's basically what we're saying here, and look at what you've done in your previous experience and maybe how you can translate that or pivot to these new opportunities. So there's definitely a lot of room in the industry specific focuses like healthcare and financial services. There's also room to distinguish yourselves in other areas like other than just being an admin, do you want to do some marketing? Do you want to do communities? Different ways you could focus on those skill sets as well.
Yep.
Yeah, your admin cert is just the beginning. There are 26 certifications. There are, I don't know how many different Salesforce products now, different clouds. Like once you get your admin cert, you
You
have to
have to
keep
keep
going.
going.
So
So
I
I
think that
think that
people,
people,
one, I don't like when people say I'm new to the ecosystem, I'm new to Salesforce. Unless you're 18, you're not new to the world, right? So you have to go into these interviews, you have to look at these job descriptions and say, what in my past work experience, what can I bring to this job? Like, what do I bring to this role? Who am I? And build out who you are in the Salesforce ecosystem. Like, you're 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 adding something to you, and then you're bringing all of you to the ecosystem, and you need to bring all of that to the job in your interviews.
Yes, 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 and yes. Tiffany, to your point, people, I mention this to people all the time that, and you totally touched on this. I just wanted to like sort of drive it home that your interests, your prior background, um, and when I say prior background, it might not be your work experience background. You might have been, let's take a scenario where you might have been, or your loved one might have been a cancer patient sitting in the hospital or going back and forth for cancer treatments over the course of many years. And you just learned Salesforce and you just got your Salesforce certification. And through your life experience, your passion and interest happens to be maybe within the healthcare industry, maybe more specifically within home healthcare industry, maybe within oncology, maybe it's for a nonprofit that is helping patients in the local community. You happen to know a whole lot about what it's like to be a patient going through the healthcare system or caring for a patient or a cancer patient in the healthcare system. You bring a lot to the table. Just focusing on your Salesforce admin certification, as Tiffany said, that is really just the first step. Anyone who is capable of memorizing is also capable of having that same Salesforce certification. So the certification itself, or even the accumulation of many certifications, is not enough to help you stand out. You need to tap into those things that excite you, those things that you're interested in, those things that you can speak passionately about. In addition, you should also tap into your own personality traits. So let's suppose for a minute that, forget the home healthcare, the scenario I brought up of the healthcare industry or caring for a cancer patient. Let's make believe that you've worked most of your career in financial services and you realize that Salesforce seems to be really interesting. So you go ahead and you get an admin certification. So now your whole resume talks about your expertise in financial services, wealth management, banking, insurance, whatever it might be. And add a layer on top of that for the admin certification. Well, guess what? You have lots and lots of clones out there, just like yourself, people who used to work for all different kinds of financial services companies that also have not only the same certification you just got that you're very proud of, but many other Salesforce certifications to go along with it. So how do you stand out? It's your personality. The way you can speak about certain business processes within financial services, the way you can speak about maybe it's the way that Salesforce is used in certain companies. Your method of communication, your personality, I should hope, is very, very different from most other people in the world, let alone other people that happen to have financial services experience and Salesforce certifications. So in the end, I think it all comes down to personal branding. So when I say it all comes down to, it's not like that. You need to have the experience. You need to have whatever the certifications, the prerequisite, whether it's education or certification or work experience. But then to truly stand out within the ecosystem, it's all about personal branding. Absolutely.
Correct.
And this is
Agreed.
where everyone, and this is regardless of any industry, everyone needs to tap into their passions, their skill set, their expertise, what makes them unique, what gets them excited, and you need to wear that on your sleeve. You need to make sure that the world is familiar with what makes you special, and it's not your Salesforce certifications. It's not.
That right.
So this is
That's
something
right.
that I am personally actually very passionate about. Where just to give you a little bit more background of myself, my interest in personal branding really came up when I was at GE. I was at GE Capital, and GE Capital in about 2008, when the world was going through a financial crisis and heads were rolling, GE Capital was laying off thousands and thousands of employees every couple of weeks. There were new rounds of layoffs happening. And I was in survival mode, trying to figure out, how am I going to support my family? How am I going to pay my mortgage? And I was looking around for different jobs, and I realized, how do I stand out from everyone else that I'm competing with? And that's where I sort of stumbled on. At the time, I was not familiar with the concept or the term personal branding. I had no clue what that meant. And that's where I started to unpack all of this and embrace it. And honestly, everything that I do today really comes from a place of personal branding. Even if it's something that, like many of you who know me know how, for example, how insanely frustrated I am with person accounts in Salesforce or multi-select pick lists. The fact that I articulate that so unfiltered and in such an unfiltered way is part of my personal branding. I'm not even saying it to say, oh, I'm more qualified in Salesforce than other people. It's just this is part of who I am. That's what sets me apart from many other people in the Salesforce ecosystem, where they might be like, oh, multi-select pick list? Sure. Tell me how you want to use it. Sure. Yeah. Let's go ahead and let's move forward with that. No. Someone brings up multi-select pick list and they will see steam coming out of my ears. They will see my nose flare and I'll get all animated and like, hell no over my dead body. That's all part of it. Anyway, I didn't mean to totally go off
And
topic.
David, you touched on the key points here. When
Yeah.
you look at your resume, you have to tell the story, and that's the key. You have to tell the story. The certifications are going to add more to your trust and the capability that yes, you know the elements of the story that you're telling. But that's the thing that is very critical on a resume is being able to tell that story, to show, oh, I have this financial services experience and I'm becoming a Salesforce admin. So I'm looking to join a company in the financial services space to continue to bring my experience. But yes, I can go and talk to my financial services end users and solicit and collect the information I need.
And
And
you
just
can
to give
bond with them and they understand what you're talking about. I'm sorry, Tiffany, I didn't mean to speak
no,
over
no,
you.
no, 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 you're
Yeah.
fine. No, I was going to say, it just as an example, I recently just helped a young lady. She has been in the education industry for 12 years. She worked for the school district and she has her master's degree and she wanted to transition to Salesforce. And so she got her admin certification. She's been working on Learning Education Cloud and some other Salesforce features. Her role, she just got her first role 2 weeks ago. It's with an educational company, a virtual education company that utilizes Salesforce. They needed another administrator. It was a perfect role for her.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and honestly, think of it from the perspective of the company, of the hiring manager. When they're comparing multiple candidates, and one particular candidate stands out because they it seems apparent, even from looking at the resume, it seems apparent that they understand the lingo, the pain points, the nuances of the industry or the company or the geographic area. That's what will stand out. It's not the number of certifications.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Which goes aligned still with your branding and making sure the other thing is making sure when you go on interviews to ask questions so you understand the role because you cannot express that you're a great fit and explain and your personality comes out and your branding is apparent if you haven't asked enough questions about the company, about the role.
Absolutely.
Very important.
Yeah, if you're not asking relevant questions, thoughtful questions, meaningful questions, you don't stand out in any way. It's like you were waiting for it to be over.
Yeah.
All right, we've got another question here that I want to call out, especially because I have some strong opinions on this, but I'm going to keep my mouth shut for a little bit. I
Uh-oh.
don't because I don't want to overtake the conversation. So Joe's asking why is it that people with prior Salesforce experience aren't getting any offers, or employers low balling candidates on salary? Is this specific to this time? Employers look down upon a career gap.
So I will say that I know that I've seen a graphic where the average Salesforce admin salary is, I don't know, 80,000 or 90,000, whatever it says. At, as a beginning admin, you may not get that salary. And some of that is dependent on the industry that you're going into and your work experience. And so I've many times in the past had to negotiate or decline an offer and say I'm not taking that salary. So that's one thing, right? So you have to know, um, you have to be aware of the range in salaries, but it definitely depends on industry. It depends on region. And it depends on how you position yourself, I think, in the role and how you leverage your experience. So if you go into a role saying you're a new Salesforce administrator, I'm not paying you 90,000 to learn how to be a Salesforce administrator for me.
That's
So,
very
but
true.
if you position yourself a little differently, maybe you can get a little higher. But I definitely agree that there's a wide range of salaries being offered. I won't go into the discriminatory aspects of that, but I'll just say that I've seen it and learned how to negotiate your salary.
Michael, your thoughts on the topic? I'm just going to put it up on the
Yeah.
screen again.
So this is a very interesting question. The first part of it that I want to answer is why aren't we getting offers? Well, I think the purpose, I mean, one of the things that you have to continue to do is after the interview, continue to treat this as a relationship, right? And you're going to go back and you should be connecting with the hiring manager and saying thank you, and also connecting with the recruiter or the HR representative that is doing the interviewing to keep that conversation going. So I've gone on interviews where I've had the interview in April, and it took about 2, 3 weeks. And I read an article, and the article said that you should keep the relationship going, send an email, and even propose what to send. And lo and behold, 2 months later, I had gotten the job because I had kept the relationship open, and I was very thoughtful to what they were looking to do and what the company, wanted. Maybe it was they want to go through interviewing more candidates. Maybe they just don't have the time to start a new employee yet, but they're looking to start them in the second half of the year. The list goes on and on and on. So I think certainly keeping that conversation open with the HR or the recruiter is very important here. It's key, and it'll help you. And honestly, you have to be thoughtful about the conversation, but as long as you're not perceived as nagging, I think they'll appreciate where you're coming from. And especially if you have other things that you're looking and potential offers that are coming along the way, you can inform them of this as well. So this is another strategy you can use and say, I'm working with another company. I think they may give me an offer soon, but I really liked what I heard about your organization, and I would love to see if there's any potential opportunity to come work with you. So that's very specific. I do think some of this could be specific to the time. It could be related to financials or performance of the company. You have to be very careful, and you have to look at that as well. So and see how the company is doing, especially during this time, to make sure that you're not going to step into a situation of potential economic uncertainty, and you're going to be unemployed 6 months later, unfortunately, because of the performance of the business. David, what would you like to add to this?
Yeah, so I agree with all of the points that both of you raised, and I often think of this from the perspective of the employer, where for any company, payroll is typically the biggest expense. And many companies are going to look for any way that they can to fill the role with a qualified candidate within their budget. So if, let's say, I am, whether it's the head of business development or CIO or the head of sales, whoever it is that's initially responsible for Salesforce or trying to fill that Salesforce admin role, and I went to bat with my senior leadership for budget approval to hire a Salesforce admin, I had to negotiate. I have some limitations there. And more often than not, it's not even the hiring manager, it's senior leadership that is restricting the hiring manager's ability to pay the appropriate going rate for that role. Now let's go back to the issue we talked about earlier of not understanding the difference between an admin and a developer and thinking of the admin and developer as being synonymous. Well, if you do a Google search for the cost of a Salesforce developer, inevitably you're going to get to some landing page or some resource that's going to showcase offshore Salesforce development for $10, $15 an hour. So now here I am as the hiring manager, and I'm trying to hire someone for $80,000 or $100,000 a year salary as a full-time employee, and I'm not fully understanding the difference between Salesforce admin and developer, so I'm sort of calling it a hybrid. Maybe I'm just calling it Salesforce developer, and my basically senior management is telling me, well, why can't you get one of these people for $10 an hour offshore? We don't have to have them as a full-time employee on benefits and payroll and earning vacation and 401k participation, etc. So as job candidates, we're faced with these are major uphill battles that we have to deal with. And there's only so much that we can control. I'm not trying to paint it as doom and gloom, just the opposite. I'm going to go back to the topic that we touched on a moment ago, personal branding. If you as the job candidate can make the case that your passion, your skill set, your prior expertise, whatever it is a total match for this company. You understand their nuances. You understand the geographic region that they're located in. You understand their industry. You understand the challenges that they are faced with. That will give enough material for the hiring manager to make the case back to senior management. Listen, this person is out of our budget, but I think it's completely worth it, and here's why. Now, it's not always going to be a slam dunk. Sometimes, the budget is not going to change. And so in the end, basically what I'm saying is companies are trying to be cheap. They're trying to be frugal, penny wise, pound foolish. They are often comfortable hiring someone that is completely inexperienced for a fraction of what the going rate should be because they simply need someone to fill that role. They don't fully understand the implications. They don't fully understand what it means to hire a Salesforce admin. They assume, because maybe even their Salesforce account executive told them, it's easy, anyone can learn it. Just go to Trailhead, go to YouTube, anyone can learn how to be a system admin. So that message, while I understand the marketing behind that message is hurting Salesforce admins in a major way. And I'm not even saying hurting from the perspective of not enabling admins to earn how much they're worth. I think it's hurting Salesforce admins because it's commoditizing what we do as admins. It's minimizing it to a point where it seems like the admin can be easily replaced by someone that has access to YouTube. All you need to do is search YouTube and learn how to build multi-select pick lists and enable person accounts, and you're good to go. You can do whatever you want. So that's where it's in the job hunt process. It's sort of our responsibility as the candidate, this admin candidate, to make the case and show the value that we bring to the table. And what does that really look like? It goes back to the interview. So when you're submitting your resume, there's not a whole lot that you can do there. As I saw in the comments, someone put in the comments, how am I supposed to really stand out when it's through machine learning and artificial intelligence that is looking for certain keywords in my resume to even make my resume stand out? There's not that. I mean, of course, you can pepper your resume with additional synonyms, colorful language that's more descriptive, more fitting with the company and the industry. Yeah, absolutely. But aside from that, it's at the interview where it goes back to not only how you answer the questions that are posed to you, but the kinds of questions that you ask. If you are asking questions, again, in line with some of the comments that I see in the YouTube feed, some of the questions that you ask about, tell me about the biggest struggles that you have with your Salesforce or managing your Salesforce org today. Tell me what kind of projects you're looking at related to Salesforce over the next 6 months. As you start to peel some layers to dive a little bit deeper into what's going on within the organization, what's going on within their Salesforce configuration, you could bring value immediately. During the interview, you can demonstrate to them, holy crap, if I was able to get that nugget of knowledge out of this person just during an interview, could you imagine if they were a full-time employee on the team? And I'm going to give you a real life scenario about that I experience all the time on this topic. So very, very often I encounter a situation where people will turn to me and say, we're really struggling. We need a Salesforce admin because we need to be able to pull reports. We need to be able to pull pipeline reports, activity reports from our team, and nobody's able to do that. Well, I come in, I don't even know what their Salesforce org looks like. And I don't know the team necessarily. But I turn to them and I say, well, without even knowing the nuances of what you're looking for exactly, as a general rule, any end user should be able to pull their own reports, should be able to know how to build reports from scratch. You don't need to be an admin. You don't need to be an IT person. You don't need to be a Salesforce developer, dude, to be able to do that. And it should be a very, very simple task. And if that's the thing you're struggling with, then one of the things that I would do if you give me the opportunity is I would perform some end user training to teach every Salesforce user how to build reports and dashboards in Salesforce. And by the way, you don't even have to wait for me to do that. There is a trail on Trailhead or a module on Trailhead specifically on reports and dashboards. There happen to be YouTube videos that Salesforce put out showing how to build reports and dashboards. But if you want, I'm happy to do that end user training too. And by just having that conversation, you're going to introduce some light bulb moments during that interview, and you're going to stand out. And that's where they're going to realize having some $10 an hour offshore person is not going to cut it. We need to make the case to bring this person into the team, to have this person as a full-time employee, because this person is going to be our rock star. Anyway, that's my take on it.
Yeah, David, to add one point to that,
Yep.
when you go to those second interviews and third interviews, you should always be researching the person before you head into the interview, because those people you may be interviewing with are the managers of the people that would be your manager when you join the organization.
Yep.
Oh my gosh. And when you look up the people that you're interviewing with, you should see if they have any Salesforce experience or what their backgrounds are. Because if you go into an interview with someone who's not really familiar with Salesforce and you talk to them about all these Salesforcey things the whole time and not highlight any of your other skills that maybe they would relate to, then you've also not connected with them.
Yeah, don't do that. That's a very bad idea.
Yep. Or if you feel the need, if you feel compelled to talk about Salesforce stuff with that person, I'm going to use the phrase dumb it down. Speak
Yeah,
English. Don't speak in
yeah.
technical terms. Don't use the word objects or records or fields. So, like, instead of saying, "Oh yeah, all we have to do is create a new field and make that specific to the record type so that it's on the page layout for people of that profile, or we could do it by a permission." No, don't do that. Instead, say, "Well, if that is an attribute that you need to track in Salesforce for only specific kinds of records, and it should only be visible to specific team members, then we can certainly, that should be a very no big deal thing to set up in Salesforce." Don't distract with technical terms. Show how you know your stuff without trying to educate or intimidate them. And show how you can provide solutions to address the problems that they are faced with, but in their language. So Tiffany,
Yep.
that's an excellent, excellent point. I'm trying to keep up with all of the. There were some really good comments on here, so I'm trying to keep up to see what question to bring up next. Um, Actually, let me take a look real quick. There was a question uh, that I saw that came in previously that I think is worth calling out. So let me go here. I'm going to cut and paste it. So in YouTube, it's going to look like it's my question, but it's really not. And I think this is worth talking about. Come on, just waiting for it to come up in the feed over here so I can throw it on the screen. Here we go. If you could do it all over again, what a seasoned Salesforce admin might say to a newbie? Tiffany, how would you respond to that? If you could do it all over again, what advice would you give to, let's say, your newbie self, your prior self?
I would say to brand yourself and to get involved in the community and network as much as you can as quickly as possible.
Yep. Michael, thoughts?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this one. What would I tell myself? I'm gonna use my pass. I'm gonna pass it to you, David, while I'm still thinking about it.
No worries. So for me, I think the concept of sales and seeing myself in a sales related role, whether it's as a job candidate, because I'm trying to essentially sell myself as a job candidate, or as a Salesforce consultant, running my own Salesforce consulting business. The concept of sales is something that always made me cringe. It always made me like immediately think of like a slimy used car salesman. And it took me a long time to realize that if I didn't think of it in the way that I was, but sort of like cut that umbilical cord and instead thought of it as, going back to the phrase that I used a few minutes ago, here's an existing problem and I happen to have a solution, and I'm offering this solution to resolve the problem. That's my offer. My offer is the solution, the skill set, the knowledge that I bring to the table to implement this solution. And by thinking of it that way, I mean, that's what sales is about. Whether you're buying a bottle of shampoo or a used car, or you're trying to sell yourself as the best Salesforce admin for this open role, there are sales elements. A long time ago, I listened to a podcast and they were talking about sales and talking about teachers and like basically addressing sales principles for teachers, how it applied to teachers. And this person was saying that teachers are probably the most what's the word I'm looking for? Like undervalued salespeople that have the most difficult sales job possible. Because think of it as, let's say, a fourth grade English teacher, where I've got my customers in the room. I'm trying to sell them on shutting up and sitting down and paying attention, listening to me, on actually embracing the content that I'm trying to share. I'm trying to sell them on doing the frickin' homework that I'm giving them to do tonight, on preparing for the upcoming exam, on not beating each other up or distracting everyone else in the room while I'm trying to teach. They're in a very difficult sales role. And that's what they do every single day, even though it's not a role that most of us think about under a sales like umbrella. Anyway, so for me, I would say to basically tell a newbie or my prior self, don't necessarily think. So yes, your job is heavily sales, but don't think of it in that gross or slimy or creepy or uncomfortable light. Instead, think of it as, here's a solution and here's a problem. And your problem happens to be a match with the solution that I happen to provide. And I've got it here for you. And it's in your best interest to pay attention to my solution. And guess what? If you're not interested in my solution, it's your loss, dude. Like, whatever. I'm going to move on and not feel any shame or a blow to my ego as a result.
So David, I have a response for this. I was thinking
Go ahead.
thinking it through there. So my response to this to tell my newbie self as an admin was that I came in from working with another CRM and I went into Salesforce and I got to drink all of the Salesforce Kool-Aid, and it was a very exciting time. Right, there was a lot of stuff that I worked on and did. And I was very active in drinking all the Kool-Aid. But at the same time, I would tell my newbie self, now a little older, a little wiser, that you need to kind of have a somewhat of a broader perspective as well on different things, and to be very important and cognizant of the fact that yes, you can still recommend a Salesforce solution, but there's also other solutions, other capabilities, and things that are out there that you're going to go up against, right? And you're going to see inside of your organization that are not necessarily solutions by Salesforce. So that would be one of the key things that I would say is to be cognizant as you're drinking this Kool-Aid that you need to have a good understanding of the broader marketplace and the capabilities that are out there. And sometimes Salesforce isn't necessarily the best solution in that class as it first comes out to market, but it will be a better solution long term, and it may provide more long term strategic values, feature sets, capabilities, and the list can go on and on from there.
And I want to
Definitely.
add to my list communication skills. Work on your communication skills. Buy some more communication books. You're going to do a lot of talking to a lot of people forever. Um,
Right. That's absolutely
unless you're a
true.
developer, maybe, but probably still even then.
I would uh, not only agree, I would take it one step further. Presentation skills.
Yep.
So many people are petrified of being the center of attention, of being at the front of the room, of having everyone looking at them, the feeling that people are judging them. And I understand all of that. Clearly, I don't have those problems. I'm as extrovert as they come. But it's having uh, having the appropriate presentation skills. You are using your presentation skills as a Salesforce admin every single day. If you simply do something as no big deal as updating a page layout to remove a field that is no longer being used. How you go about not only communicating that, but the way in which you present it to others is a big deal. It makes all the difference in the world. So you can highlight, like I said before, problem solution. Here was the problem that people were experiencing before. There was a field that was on the page layout. It showed up in reports and in list views, etc. And nobody needed it. Nobody wanted it. It kept reminding everyone of the Frankensteins of the past that where it was created and maybe populated with bad data. And we got the approval that it's okay to go ahead and delete the field. So not only is it now no longer appearing on the page layout, occupying valuable real estate on the screen, but now it's also disappeared from all of the list views and all of the reports. And now your screens are simpler. It's just in the way that you present it, while at the same time encouraging folks. Again, as the admin, you're encouraging your users. If there are other problems, ideas, enhancements, suggestions on making the system better, like here is the process that we have as a team to go ahead and do that. You're giving that feedback. It's then reinforcing the value that you bring to the team. It's then reinforcing, here's why we need to continue paying that person's payroll and not hiring someone for $10 an hour offshore. It all feeds itself. It all goes back to the same key principles. So, yes. Okay. Let's see what other questions came in. I sort of lost track Okay. I have over here. Hang on 1 second. Let me. I want to make sure. This is a question I personally do not have any familiarity with, and I'm cutting and pasting from the Google Form submissions. As soon as it comes up in our feed, I can show it on the screen. Here we go. I would very much like to know about visa sponsoring employers, how to find them, and showcase
Oh,
skills to get hired.
I was supposed to do a webinar on this. I was gonna reach out to some companies to do this. I've gotten this question before too.
This is
I,
where I
I
have nothing to add to the conversation.
I feel like that you have to go to enterprise, like bigger companies, in order to do this because I think it's expensive and they have to have the processes in place. And so I think you have to go to a bigger organization, a Deloitte, an Accenture. They have to be established in order to be able to take on the process of sponsoring visas.
Yeah,
That makes
it
complete
is very
sense.
true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say any of those Accenture, Deloitte, IBM, the list keeps going on and on, would have the capacities to consider this. It is an expense, and in some organizations, they may not want to take on that expense as well in the hiring of the role because they're providing other benefits and things as part of your salary. So it is something you have to go out there. But I would say definitely the consulting partners are a good place to start. And then you could go from there.
And I think when you're looking at companies, again, this is about being very specific about what types of jobs when you're searching for jobs. But look for global companies. You like when you're looking up a company, there are companies that you may not recognize the name, but you should look at those companies and see if they're a multinational company, if they're a global company, then they probably have processes for that.
That makes complete sense.
I would say those are the companies that are also the easier ones to interview with, partially because there's more information about that organization that's out there. So you can go look at annual reports and news stories and different things to understand how the organization is growing and developing in the marketplace. So
Yep. I'm going to throw another question on the screen. This one also came in from our Google form. Is it possible to find a job as an entry level admin without developer skills?
Of course. An admin is not a developer. I literally, anytime a recruiter calls me when I was job searching, I would literally tell them that. An admin is not a developer. I know amazing developers that know nothing about the admin side, like, like this much. Like they know like very little. It's two very different paths. And so again, when you see a job, the job description is a suggestion. They have no idea. They Googled some stuff, they talked to some people, they made a job description. And so apply anyway and then find out and ask enough questions about the job, about the role, about their org. I saw somebody say you should definitely ask questions about their org because there's some orgs you may want to run from. But
yeah,
you do not need developer skills to be an admin. And I don't even I tell people if you want to be a developer, don't even take the admin exam. Like I don't even recommend you do it because it's the admin exam covers so many things. It's the most annoying exam ever. And because it's so broad and it's totally different than the PD1 exam
yeah.
that I'm still trying to pass.
Good luck.
Yeah, that PD1 exam is definitely where you want to focus, especially if your career path is a development role. So if I see a PD1 exam on a resume, it shows that at least from a certification experience, you've proved some of that knowledge. and whether or not you put it into practice is where the interview and conversation will go.
Yeah, I agree.
Excellent
I just
points.
think it's two different paths. You don't like it's people that wrote that they didn't know what they were writing. So when you look at it, just know they didn't know what they were writing, and just decide if you want to apply or move on.
Um, Hang on one second. Actually, before I bring up the next question, I just want to call out, especially as it relates to getting your first admin job without developer skills. Um, some of you might already know this. If you do, I apologize. I have a 22-year-old son who, in July, took my Salesforce admin bootcamp. Prior to taking that course in July, all he knew about Salesforce was like overhearing me talk about Salesforce for years, but he never logged into Salesforce, never did anything in Salesforce. He took my course and he took it. I encouraged him to take the course because I wanted that he should get the certification even if he does not plan on being a Salesforce admin, just to have it as one other thing to stand out as a job candidate if he ever wants to work for a company that happens to be using Salesforce. He could be of more value to that company. Talking about someone who's brand new to the workforce. He could be of more value to that company knowing and understanding basics of Salesforce admin skills without the work experience. Anyway, he took the course very seriously. He studied, and about 2 weeks ago, he passed the admin certification exam, which, of course, I'm very thrilled and impressed that he was able to do that. He has his first job as a Salesforce admin. He actually got the job before he sat for the exam. He got a job where the word Salesforce was not listed anywhere in the job description. And this is really important to drill in because it goes back to what we were talking about before. Companies may or may not even fully understand, or they might even not even think about their use of Salesforce as it relates to any particular role that they have within the organization. So my son was applying for a job essentially as a remote secretary for a small little startup, and just as like a virtual assistant essentially. And he applied for the job, and during the interview, he's in college, so he figured it's a part-time job. I can earn some money and like whatever. During the interview, they used the word Salesforce, and his face and voice lit up, and he said to them, "Oh, you use Salesforce? What are you doing in Salesforce?" And they started answering in a very no big deal way. And he said, "Well, that's really cool because actually I'm studying for the admin certification exam. I just went through a boot camp to learn Salesforce as an admin." These guys had no clue what an admin even is. They could not care less when he talked about sitting for the admin certification exam. They were like, okay, yeah, sure, whatever. And they just kept talking about the other virtual assistant tasks that they wanted his help with. Anyway, now that he is certified as a Salesforce admin, he basically weaseled his way to take over the admin responsibilities for their Salesforce. He has no development skills whatsoever. He has no prior work experience as a Salesforce admin. Now, the good thing is, it's a small little startup. Their utilization of Salesforce is in its infancy stage. We're not talking about going into Home Depot and it's at an enterprise level and he weaseled his way in as a Salesforce admin. But he is developing real life hands-on skills. He's understanding all of these concepts that he was otherwise simply learning about in just the, throwing out there as a concept of roles, profiles, and permission sets and objects and dependent pick lists and reports and dashboards. These were all just vague concepts to him until he got the job and started to see the Frankenstein rudimentary way that they were using Salesforce in its infancy stage in that organization. And he realized a lot of opportunities for himself to introduce tremendous value to the organization by doing some very basic stuff. So my point is, to get your first job, you're not even looking for the word Salesforce anywhere in the job description or the job title, let alone the word admin or developer. So,
And that's exactly the recommendation I give to college students. And so the strategy sometimes for experienced people versus college students is a little different, but for exactly the reasons that you said, having Salesforce as a skill is just like how Microsoft Office used to be 20 years ago.
exactly.
If you had to, it was like a thing, like, oh, I know how to use Microsoft Office, I know how to use Word and Outlook, and like you would list all these things that nobody would probably even list today, but you would list all of these things on your resume. And I feel like Salesforce is to that point, it's so broadly used. Even just having it as a skill when you're a college student with no other experience makes you more competitive, and it could open up doors. And I explain that to my college students all the time.
Yep,
So I love
for
that
sure.
story.
Yeah, I was going to add, David, to this point. There's a ton of resources out there. Salesforce, to drink the Kool-Aid for a second, Salesforce is doing the certification days. So that is a great resource capability for you to go and actually interact with somebody at Salesforce and potentially ask questions that you may have about the material and the topics. And I'm also seeing that there's some courses at a heavily discounted rate as well that are coming through. So that's also some other materials to take a look at.
Definitely. All right, we've got another question here. How to present myself as a remote worker to companies that are searching for talents to fill their on site Salesforce positions and show them the value of hiring me to work for them remotely.
I feel like that was a question for like 2019. I don't know that this is a 2020 question. Uh, there's so many roles now that are like open to remote. So
By the way, I have to tell you, I have some clients that they'll say it like in a very casual way. Oh yeah, we're having an offsite meeting, like, and they'll start name like Orlando or Scottsdale, Arizona. I'm like, wait, did you just say you're bringing in all your salespeople to a conference room somewhere? They're like, yeah. I'm like,
Mhm.
what world are you living in?
Yeah,
Some
I
some
would.
have asked me whether or not I can come to do end user training. I'm like, I'm afraid to go to the supermarket. Like, what?
It's funny. I have a little bit of experience with this, partially because I took on a new role in 2020. Um, and my experience with this is that this is something that you can have a conversation with your potential employer as the conversation progresses. So you need to know when to have this conversation. Maybe this isn't necessarily the first round, but maybe this is the second round, and you can be honest, with your expectations and what the employer is also looking to do. I started this new role that I'm in July, and the original plan for me was to come back in the fall. That plan was amended based on where we are, as a state and as a country, and all these different things. And that's something that they're continuing to look at and evolve. So I would say that employers should understand where this question is coming from. And also, there is a lot of potential opportunity for employers to say, okay, we would like you to work remote for this period of time, and then maybe when this time expires, you would come back and go into the office. So I do think there's more that's going to develop, and some of the larger companies, Google, Salesforce, keep pushing those dates out. So that also says that there's uncertainty even in their space, you know, with these large offices and them putting in what's it called, their workforce and capacity back into these buildings. So yeah.
I think there are also, aside from COVID, there are, so let's make believe that we're having a conversation either in 2019 or probably 2022, because I doubt 2021 is going to be any different. So let's take COVID out of the equation. I think that there are many situations where, depending on the culture that's going on within the organization, I understand and I see the value. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I understand where they're coming from and I see the value in having on site presence. For example, let's say, you know what, I had a client in particular based in Dallas, Texas, and it was a nonprofit, a very large nonprofit, and most of the employees within this nonprofit, not only were they completely anti-technology, um, I would say the average age of the typical employee at this nonprofit was over 65 years old. They were also very, very set in their ways. They had trouble with change management, and it wasn't the client that even asked or wanted or expected me to be on site. I felt, for the duration of working with this client, I felt I really needed to be on site to be able to have a meaningful conversation with them. Like, when your meetings start off with 15 to 20 minutes of your participants struggling to get onto Zoom, and how difficult is it? Like, it can't possibly, the rest of the meeting can't possibly go well if they had to fight just to get into the Zoom meeting. And then you start talking about like why first name and last name on a contact have to be two separate fields to someone who's used to shoving it all into, cramming it all into an Excel spreadsheet and color coding it. Like, no, it's not going to go well. So there are, again, it goes back to the culture of like what's going on, the unique struggles. Sometimes it's only one person, sometimes it's an entire department, sometimes it's the entire company, where there are certain struggles that are going on over there that really are best suited to be resolved with in-person on-site presence. Now, with that being said, very often a prospect will reach out to me. Again, let's make believe COVID doesn't exist. Prospect will reach out to me. Where are you located? Oh, you're located in northern New Jersey. Great. We're in the city. So we'd like for you to come in so that we can do, whether it's end user training or business requirements gathering, or come in so that you can help fix our Salesforce. I'll turn to them and I'll say, listen, I'm happy to come in to be on site for all of those things. Like, it's really not a problem. However, you should sort of think about Salesforce as sort of like your Netflix account or your Amazon account. Like, do you really need an employee from Netflix to come into your living room to choose a particular video or your settings in Netflix? Like, have you ever had someone from Amazon come into your home or your office to set something up for you regarding your Amazon account? Like, it's a cloud-based tool. Like, even if I show up on site, we're all going to have to be logged into separate computers to do it. So I'm happy to come in and do it on site, but guess what? We could jump in and get started like now instead of trying to find the right time to schedule where there's the travel time involved. And yeah, guess what? I'm billing you for the travel time and the parking and the tolls that are in. All of a sudden they change their tune very quickly.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to consider. So I'm not at all trying to say that I'm always in agreement with on-site. I'm not. But there are scenarios where it's tremendously valuable, sometimes imperative. Other times it's
Yeah.
totally not needed.
And I agree. I think for, again, it's a culture thing 'cause some companies are not, they're not remote friendly. The other thing is I think for newer resources, for new admins, new developers, without COVID in the mix, I think it's valuable for newer resources to be in the office. I just I think you learn more, you can collaborate more. I mean, you can certainly collaborate virtually, and I do that a lot. But sometimes it is better, your first 6 months or so to actually be in an office if they have an office. And so I also feel that more senior positions are usually remote. So I mean, I've been working remotely since I don't know, like 2008 or something. So. Um, I think it depends on the level. The more senior you are, the more easier it is to find a remote role. The more junior you are, I think the more that people want to make sure that you're okay. Because again, everyone does not do well with asking for questions, with collaborating very well. And so they have to kind of, not, I don't want to say watch you, but just, they want to be there for you. And so I don't think necessarily in the beginning being in the office is a terrible thing, but I think having that conversation to see what the flexibility is to be able to work from home um, a certain amount of days after maybe your probation period would be a good conversation to have to kind of ease into it as well.
Yep, definitely. We've got another question here, and I think this is probably the last one based on timing. Is probably the last one that we can address, which is a pretty good one, I think. How to best find your first Salesforce job during COVID. So we talked about elements of finding your first job and standing out and personal branding and tapping into your prior life experience, but even more so during COVID. Thoughts on that?
So in general, what I tell people when you're looking for a job is that you should look for jobs and have a what do you call those search things? I don't know what they're called. So
Job
the
alert?
alerts, the job alerts, that's what they're called. Thank you. So you should have a job alert set up, and you should apply for jobs within the first day or two that they're posted. Because if you find a job and it was posted last week, it's probably already gotten lots and lots of responses, and so you want to be one of the first. I don't know if you're without a job, then this may not be feasible, but a premium LinkedIn is very valuable for that because you can see how many people have applied for a job and you can see more insights. But if that's not a possibility, make sure you're checking your alerts every day. Like your resume should be on your phone. You should be able to apply from a job for everywhere. You should be sitting in the bathroom and see an alert pop up, and you should be able to apply for the job right then. Seriously. And you should have multiple, sorry. And you should have multiple
Oh, the
versions of your
visuals.
resume. You should. It should be right there, and you should be like, there's a job, and you should apply. You have to be on top of it. You have to be applying for jobs every day. Like if you're looking for a job, this is not like, oh, I'll apply to a couple jobs. Like you should be applying to jobs every day as soon as they post with the right resume. You may need different types of resumes depending on what the job postings are looking like today. So an admin focus, a BA focused, whatever is in between, and you should be ready to um, modify your resume to look like a perfect fit for that role and then apply.
Yep. Michael, thoughts?
I would definitely say go out there and find the key influencers in the space. So Salesforce, folks like David. There's a lot of other folks out there like David Liu as well, and the list just keeps going on and on. But certainly follow and try to connect with them, see what they're sharing and posting out there, and be feel free to join those conversations as well if you have questions. I suspect a lot of the key influencers would be very happy to talk to you offline. User group leaders in different states, as well. And you could even go down and see if there are admins in different roles that seem to be, developing that influence. You can connect with them, but be sincere, and say, hey, I'm new to the ecosystem. I'd love to connect with you and gain that experience. And I think you'll see that people will generally want to connect with you as well.
Yeah. I think also not only joining user groups, and like now during COVID, in a way, it's easier than ever before because not only can you join user groups within your niche, whether it's in preferred industry or plural industries, geographic region, attending those user group meetups is as easy as clicking on a link like you guys just did. And in today's world, like here, we are user group leaders for the Northern New Jersey user group. And we welcome people. Forget like we happen to know people snuck in from other regions. No, we welcome people from wherever to join. And so my point is not only to join other user groups that are of interest to you, actually participate in their user group meetups. And that's where you will get to become familiar with other people, not only the user group leaders, the other participants. Join the user group in the success community, see what people are posting over there. Some user groups also have Slack channels. Join those Slack channels. Inevitably, connect with people on LinkedIn. Inevitably, people are going to be posting about a job opening that they are aware of. It's also completely fair game for you as the job seeker to put out there within the group, hey, by the way, I'm looking for this type of a job, this type of a role. Here's what my experience is all about. Here's like the perfect kind of role for me. And if people know of something, they will share it. Very often, myself and other people in the Salesforce community are made aware of a particular job. A lot of times, a hiring manager at some company, a lot of times it's a hiring manager. I have no clue who the hell they are. I know nothing about their company, but they reach out to me asking, hey, by the way, do you know anyone for this particular role? And there is not a particular person that comes to mind. I will go ahead and share it. I'll share it on social media. I'll share it in the user group. I'll share it on the Slack channel. I'll share it in various places. So joining those user groups are a great way to get a sense of who's who within the Salesforce ecosystem. To just the more people you know, the more you're opening yourself up to scenarios where someone can make the right introduction for you, or the right opportunity might present itself to you. And you never
I
know.
agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
Brian Owens, who volunteers for with HBC Force with me, that's how he got his first role in the Salesforce ecosystem. He got his admin cert, met someone at a user group meeting, applied for the role, and got the job. His very first job from a user group. And so I know lots of people, like you said, David. I share job postings all the time that I see on social media, mostly LinkedIn, but um, I think that's a great way to get introductions to people maybe already at those companies, or to see the roles that people have asked them to share or asked for. I get requests like that all the time. Like, do you know someone for this role? I'm like, no, but send it to me and I'll post it.
Yep. Yep. All right. I think that's it for us. Before we wrap up, any final thoughts, Tiffany, Michael?
Um, I would just say that if you're having a difficult time right now finding your first role, or navigating your career, to just stick at it. Look at your resume, think about all the tips that we shared, and really go back over all of these areas. There's plenty of opportunities out there, and this is all part of your journey. It may not all be easy. Everybody's journey look different, but you can do it, and we believe in you.
Awesome.
I
Michael,
think you summed it
thoughts?
up well. Yeah, definitely, Tiffany. Everything you said is very relevant, and certainly feel free to connect with any of us today if you have any other conversations or follow ups that you'd like to do.
Awesome. Thank you all for joining. I'm really appreciative, Tiffany, for you making the time to present and help us out to really help the community with some serious, when it comes to job hunting, it takes a whole other level of emotional energy for folks there's ego involved, there's skill set, and the insights that you bring to the table are tremendously appreciated. Michael and I appreciate it. The community appreciates it. So thank you, Tiffany.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Our
This was
pleasure.
awesome.
Yeah. All right. We're going to wrap it up. See you all soon. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.